The point of today is to focus on the landscape of the Claylands and bring down experts from around the country who are experts in landscape restoration issues from various different perspectives to focus for a day on the landscape in the Claylands and see what opportunities and challenges and issues are surrounding the future of that landscape and how we can work together to possibly do something really special. The tendency is for people to focus on the new opportunity, which is all around the ecotowns developments, but in actual fact, if you put all those together, it's only 700 hectares. We're actually talking about an entire landscape of over 30 square miles that includes industrial workings, it includes agricultural land, and it includes small communities separated from other small communities by a couple of miles of agricultural or industrial landscape.
Well, I think the big opportunity is all about remembering that communities have grown up with that space round about them, whilst someone can come in afresh from somewhere else and think this is a blot on the landscape. To most of the communities in the area, their families, their parents, their grandparents have grown up with these things there, so they are part of their heritage. The typical solution was come in, clean it all away and start again, and that actually helped break up communities more. So I think here, first thing I'd do is say, let's look at what's there. Let's look at what the problem areas are. Problem areas on the sites, and there'll be bits where they need cleaned up, they need some restoration. But then let's very much talk with the people who live round about it, because it is their heritage. Just as buildings, whether it's a fantastic old house, is heritage for people and they like looking at it. This is industrial heritage, it just doesn't necessarily have buildings on. It's not about creating a big new communities that some of the other ecotowns were. Part of making it robust, we think, is very much getting in place sustainable management of the open space.
I think one of the great challenges has got to be to match the economic health and the economic side of the area with the landscape and biodiversity health with it. The two very much go together, and the engagement of the communities. In the early days, there was a lot of focus on the techniques of reclamation, how do you get trees and grass and all sorts of things to grow on some of these landscapes. Nowadays the emphasis is a lot more on getting community engagement, getting people involved, getting it to be functional in the broadest sense. They have the sort of landscape restoration and the community and social restoration as part of the sort of post-mining regeneration. The two very much go together. One without the other is only half the story. Quite often they start off as a community that's been closely involved in being employed in the industry. They have a very close relationship, economic relationship. If when mines close, then that completely changes, and sometimes you get a completely different type of community moving in who don't have that emotional connection. Over the years, the biggest mistakes you see in restoration are because a lot of emphasis on upfront capital costs, no provision for long-term management, maintenance, engagement. So rather than spend 100 million or whatever in 1 year, spend 50 million and put the other 50 aside to maintain that and get it right, and do something realistic and make sure that it works in the long term. It's long-term sustainability that's important, not instant awards and instant accolades because we've turned a mine site green. It's whether it's still green in 10 years and still functional. That's important.
I think the thing is that you've got something incredibly important. So the first thing would be, if you do something, you've got to be really confident that it's going to be really quality. So I think whatever happens, you've got to preserve the best of what's there, which is still very incredible. But obviously pick up with the connection with people, which has got to be made in a really wholesome fashion, in a very engaging way.
The thing about the clay country is, most strikingly, it already is a landscape. So rule one is, don't knock it to pieces until you know what you've got. This is the one eco-town that has really well-established communities within it. So similarly, there are people there who know and love this place. Spending time really getting to understand people's understanding of the place, I think, is a really important part of what Eden is doing here. The really challenging thing, I think, is how you get from here to there, how you get from the first developments to a whole community living in a different kind of way. If the eco-towns don't achieve a lifestyle change, then they're just another big housing development with thicker loft insulation, and there's no point in that. But a lot of what you need in order to live in a more environmentally sound way requires a critical mass. You can't have a comprehensive public transport system that allows you to stop using the car until you have enough people to use the buses. You can't have a really sophisticated waste management and waste separation system until there are enough of you separating your waste to make it worthwhile. Having the Eden project right on the doorstep helps enormously, because I think you have got 10 years here of demonstrating what the ideals would be.
I think it's one of the most important landscapes in Britain in terms of its scale and the scale of engagement of people with the land. So we need to develop the right scale of vision for that, and it needs to be a long-term vision. Some lessons from elsewhere I think are important. We need some kind of an accumulating fund, an endowment fund, to sustain the management of this landscape. That's absolutely critical. We need to recognise the distinctiveness and the quality even of the industrial landscapes and the industrial features themselves. So if some of them have outlived their obvious usefulness in normal terms, they haven't in cultural terms.
I think the biggest challenge that you have is the long-term funding for the maintenance and the management of the land holding. That sort of an incremental approach, gradually building a bit by bit, allows you to test ideas, see whether they're successful, to engage with the local community and bring them along with you bit by bit as you take your project forward.
If I had a crystal ball to look 20 years into the future, I would hope to see a thriving China clay industry, and I mean that, and I'm confident that we will. I would hope to see a China clay, or an industry that works in close liaison with its neighbours, the community, and I would like to see that liaison develop. And also I'd like to see an industry and community working together on innovative restoration projects, similar to the sort of projects that we've seen here in Mid-Cornwall in the last few years, examples being the internationally acclaimed Heathland project and recently the Woodland project.
I think the biggest challenge that you're going to have is engaging and keeping the communities on board and making sure that the 6 sub-eco towns, if you want to call it that, don't become sterile islands in the landscape. They've got to fit in, they've got to communicate, they've got to link with all the other communities here, and they can't just become isolated islands. I think there's a great deal of experience out there. You're not starting from scratch necessarily, so don't ignore it.
Communities are crucial to the regeneration of the Claylands because without people you don't get regeneration. The problem that we have is that the planning process expects people to make themselves obvious to the process, and actually what we need to do is make the planning process obvious to the people that it's going to affect. I think there's a real opportunity to grow a culture of community-led planning, and that means that we need to think a lot more carefully about a process that inspires people, that raises their aspirations, that is creative and immersive. The benefits for local communities to interact with the regeneration process are that they should be able to put forward their ideas for better employment opportunities, to be able to voice their need for affordable housing, to be able to put forward their ideas and thoughts around accessing the natural landscape and the benefits that they can derive from that, be it through employment, be it through recreation, all sorts of different things. So the benefits are huge, but we need to help them and inspire them to raise their aspirations about what those benefits could be.